Hi, everyone. We're back with our amazing Shannon, who all of you appreciate. And we're going to be talking today about a controversial topic, which is vaccines. Now, admittedly, Shannon and I are a little bit biased in one direction. However, we're going to be doing our best to be neutral. And our goal is to help you really commit yourself to being educated, whichever direction you choose to go. Be educated on why you're doing what you're doing, not being intimidated or manipulated to do something that doesn't necessarily make sense to you, but it seems like what everybody else is doing. And just realize that there are consequences actually in both directions and be aware of those and know what's best for you, for your family, for children, grandchildren, just to get educated. Obviously, in the time that we have, we're just going to hit the tip of the iceberg. Since the evolution of vaccines around the 1940s, a lot of things have begun to happen that didn't exist before that. It could be a coincidence. There could be a reason. The key is that you get educated. So, without further ado, Shannon, why don't you share some of your perceptions, some of your insights on this topic, and let's help people understand what they might want to delve into more deeply.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, in keeping the spirit of trying to stay neutral, and I'll do my best to just I will present some facts and try and keep my opinion out of it. But yeah, I mean, since the 1940s, when vaccines started coming onto the market, there has absolutely been an evolution here. Even since the mid 80s, when I was born, I mean, I had five, maybe six vaccines when I was first born, and that was what was on the CDC schedule. Now, children, if they follow the CDC schedule as laid out, by the time they are, I think it's 16 or 17, they will have had just over 80 shots. And that's a lot of material. And what's in these shots? Like um obviously you're going to have these attenuated viruses, but I think and that's a whole conversation in and of itself, but even just the adjuvants, even just the other ingredients, we like peanut oil, for example, is what's called grass, generally considered safer. What's that acronym,
Safe,
Cheryl? Yeah, generally
generally regulated as safe grass.
safe, yeah. So when things are categorized as grass, it doesn't have to be on the label. But so it gets real tricky, and there can be things in these vaccines and these syringes that we don't even know are there. And the whole point of getting a vaccine is to elicit a response from your immune system. So if there's, again, just setting the virus aside, setting the polio, the pertussis, the chicken pox, I mean, just putting that all on the table. What about the aluminum, the red dye 40, the peanut oil, the latex, the aluminum, like all these different things, the polysorbate 80 that is literally designed to drive these things through the blood-brain barrier into the brain. Um, oh gosh, it's already hard to like get overwhelmed on this topic. So even peanut allergies. I mean, I used to be able to bring like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to school, and now, I mean, all schools are peanut free. So again, like we're not trying to make like X is causing Y, but like there's definitely some pretty heavy correlated things happening here since the introduction of vaccines. Um, Type 1 diabetes. Oh,
Just
yeah.
because you mentioned that peanuts and how explosive that has become as an issue in school, I was not this was something I was not aware of, and I found this fascinating because I have a lot of clients who either they or their children deal with peanut allergies, and there's different allergy clearing techniques, and typically they don't work on peanuts, which I always found that that was interesting. So, in the data that you can go check out for yourself, before 1900, reactions to peanuts were unheard of. In 1997, 290 children in the US were peanut allergic. In 2008, it became 1.5 million. And yet, peanut oil is not required to be on the labels of any of these vaccines because it's in that GRAS list, generally regarded as safe. I just looked at that and went, I wonder how many issues that we have decided are now common have
Hmm.
happened in the last 20 years, 40 years, all the way back to 1940. And peanut allergy was not one I'd ever thought of. That just never occurred to me until I started looking at some of the data. But then you were gonna go ahead with diabetes.
Well, and sorry, and real quick on the peanut, and I guess I just kind of glazed over again, like injecting peanut oil into the bloodstream is not the way that our bodies would typically digest a food substance, right? I mean, you are directly hitting the immune system, so it's going to tag it as a foreign offender. So when you eat anything peanuts or containing peanuts, it's the immune system is going to fire up and be like, oh no, like we've been vaccinated against that. So again, things that are like, and the whole premise of vaccines too, when you're just hundreds of years ago before we had vaccines, you were naturally immunized just being a living being on this planet. So if you were exposed, if your sibling or somebody in your community or tribe came down with an infection, you were likely exposed through your nose. You breathed it in, which those are the two main ways you're going to, contract something. And that is the proper way. It hits adenoids, tonsils, it goes through your nose, your sinus. I mean, that's where like your immune system starts to detect the outside world. So by completely bypassing what our normal immune system function is supposed to look like and injecting it straight into your muscles or your blood, it's not a natural way to contract, again, whooping cough or pertussis or polio. So just maybe in your own time, you can go down that kind of a rabbit hole. And then type 1 diabetes. So I'm just going to throw out some facts here. So between 1945 and 1969, rates were 1 in 7,100. And then in 2003, the CDC estimates 400 to 500 children have type 1 diabetes in the US. And just a reminder, that's the autoimmune version. And then the MMR package insert clearly states diabetes to be one of the adverse effects. And another thing too is you don't just get one shot for one pathogen. Like they're stacking 2, 3, upwards of 5 or 6, like 6 in 1. And I just mentioned how it's not natural to contract any of these things we're being vaccinated against through an injection, let alone 4, 5, 6, 7 at a time. Like, no wonder these kids have these reactions like immediately after having these injections. And then heavy metals. So aluminum is there used to be mercury, and at least there's been awareness and pushback that mercury has, for the most part, come out of vaccines, but they just replaced it with aluminum. It was just a bait and switch. And we know aluminum is a neurotoxin. And that, again, I mentioned that polysorbate 80 just drives it into the brain even deeper. That's associated with seizures, comas, decreased level consciousness, prolonged seizures. It's associated with Parkinson's disease, and that's up on the rise. ALS, like all these neurological disorders. And it's starting to be diagnosed earlier and earlier and earlier. It's not just, an elderly issue anymore. Autism. I'm not going to say that vaccines cause autism, but again, there's correlation. So the first case of autism was documented and defined in 1943. Vaccination was becoming in widespread usage in around the late 1940s, and it's obviously increased in each decade. So in 1970, 1 in 10,000 children were autistic. We'll just jump to 2011, 1 in 110, 1 in 110 children were autistic. Now in 2024, it's about 1 in 50. I even think that's generous. I think it's probably closer to 1 in 20. That's the figure that I've heard, are falling in within this autism spectrum. So again, coming back to like the whole theme of all of these talks that I've done with Cheryl is how toxic the world we live in, right? And our whole goal with CellCore, and just it should be a personal goal for everyone, is just to stay on top of it, to try and keep your body as clean as possible. So it's all about like what's in your toxic bucket. And these vaccines heavily contribute to your toxic burden when you get one. And again, the number of vaccines that children are getting now is astronomical, and it's unprecedented. So it could absolutely be maybe the final straw, or it's adding to the bucket, and maybe some other event, finally tip the child into that autism bucket. But it's all things to think about. I don't know, Cheryl, if you have anything you want to throw
Well,
in.
I was sitting there thinking 1940. I was born after that. I was born in the 50s. So my exposure to vaccines is different than Shannon's is. Our daughter's experience is actually fairly similar, probably, to Shannon's children, because once we learned about it, we made different decisions. But for each one of you listening, and you think about your family, children, grandchildren, you've all been on a different journey in regards to vaccines. If you've been in the military or if your parents were in the military, the amount of vaccines given to military people is extraordinarily high. Forrest brother was in the Marines, and they just line them up and jab, 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 and it was, and then they'd all get sick, but it was just part of the routine of being a Marine. Um, so all of those are things to consider because it is a toxic load on the body. And if you one of the things that I saw, and I was a part of that as a practitioner for 30 years, now almost 35 years. For so many years, when I would see health issues, it was take a supplement for this and a supplement for this and a supplement for this and deal with all these deficiencies. And really, that's only it's the same way of thinking as do this and take a drug, do this and take a drug. You're just substituting what you're giving, but you're not getting to the root behind what's going on. So when we don't deal with the toxic load, that increases the presence of various pathogens. It depletes our nutrients even faster. And then we're struggling, especially in the last 4 years when toxins are no longer physical, it's the emotional, it's isolation, it's fear, it's anxiety to an unknown world and what's going to happen. This toxic load is enormous. And I am so thankful for the technologies we've been introduced to in the last couple of years, with CellCore being one of the key ones. If you don't deal with the toxic load and start out with energy at the cells and have drainage pathways open and address the toxic load, I can tell you both personally and professionally, you chase the symptoms through product after product after product after product without hardly any breakthroughs. It's expensive and it's hard. And the results I have seen, both personally and phenomenal breakthroughs this last year for me with my brain and with clients who never see me, they just listen to what Shannon and I are sharing. These breakthroughs are unprecedented, but it's based on energy and drainage and really coming to understand that we have full toxic buckets. So I don't want to cause fear or anger or angst or retaliation on this topic. I just want you to go do the homework. Go do the research. Go find out what's changed since 1940. Take a look at your own health, maybe your grandparents, maybe your parents, maybe your children. Just take a look. Be willing to be neutral. Do the investigation. And if you come to the conclusion that vaccines are totally safe at any dose, at any amount, bless you, you still have a toxic load because you still live in this world, and it would still be incredibly intelligent to deal with reducing that toxic load. So that's my spiel. Is there something you want to close with, Shannon?
Yeah, I just if anybody is feeling like, well, I like where do I go? Where do I even start to do my own research? I highly recommend a book called Dissolving Illusions. It's called Dissolving Illusions: Disease, Vaccines, and the Forgotten History. That's by Suzanne Humphries, Humphreyes. She's a medical doctor. That's a phenomenal book to get you on the path of enlightenment on this topic.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. We've got some very exciting topics coming in the next several weeks. I hope this has at least piqued your interest, caused you a desire to do a little bit of research on your own, and most of all, let's drain that toxin bucket. Thanks a lot,
Yes.
Shannon,
It's
and we'll
okay.
see you all next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.